95th birthday, unbelievable to me that I am at that length of my life. I feel fine. I am so pleased to be here with you.
Oh, we're pleased to be with you.
Happy to see you, Sonny.
So what we're going to try to do, I guess, in the next hour, hour and a half, however long you guys want to be on, is to recall some of the anecdotes and have some of the people who were involved, including the director of Wonderama, and and then hear your memories, hear your anecdotes, so that together, to the extent we can in the next hour and a half, recapture some of those wonderful times.
So anyone who wants to ask a question, please do so in the chat box.
Okay, I don't know about that, so you guys are on with that one.
The way this will work.
I'm here to.
I'm sorry. I was going to say hi, Ahmed, and I'm going to help Sonny to read them to him. So
Ed is a longtime friend.
I've known Sonny since 1976, so I'm happy to be here today. To that end,
as am I.
I hope so. Well, we don't have any questions yet. Here we go. I see people starting to offer comments. But Sonny, maybe perhaps we start with the beginning of your era in television. What made you decide to go into television? And can you tell us about your first job?
Well, in 1956, I was hired by CBS Television to do a show called Let's Take a Trip. Maybe it was 1955. It went on for about 2.5 years. And I was to take two young people, 9 and 10, pardon Ginger, to a different location every week. And live on camera every Sunday, we were on there with Let's Take a Trip for 2.5 years. Now having said that, you have to understand that in those days, nothing was miniaturized. The equipment was the ponderous equipment that came out of the studios on the cameras on dollies and the big thick coaxial cables and the big trucks, 2 big trucks, one for the equipment and the other for the control room and the dressing room. And then we traveled to a different location every week. That was the first time in the history of television, network television, that anybody had tried to do this kind of a show. It carried with it all kinds of inherent problems. Having to find the place that we can hook up and get our cables into New York, having to figure out how to work with the people that are on that location, what the camera was capable of doing, and how to deal with strange things that would happen during these live television shows. So we had to be prepared for all of that. And I had Bud and Ginger, 2 kids, 1 9, 1 10, with me. And so we went on an adventure every week. And I mean, it was an adventure in both sense of the word. It was an adventure for you who are watching, and it was an adventure for us doing it. And so each week had its oddities. It's a time when you were facing crises and you had to deal with them live. So, but we did that for 2.5 years, Bud and Ginger and me, and that was my first network television show, 1955, I believe, the middle of 1957, or yeah, I think that was it.
Okay. I think that Artie is on, and I think you wanted to tell a story to us. Is that how it's going to be?
Well, let me first of all, Artie, are you there?
Yes, I am, Sonny.
Okay. Artie Forrest was the director of Wonderama, the show most of you will remember. And for 7 years, he was my guy every week. And let me tell you, everybody knows I was the star of Wonderama. But I had a partner, and that was Artie. Because I never knew what I was going to do at any one time on the show, and so neither did he. And he had 2 cameras, as I recall. Is that right in the studio? 2 cameras?
3.
All right. Yes?
3, sorry.
Oh, we had
Three.
three. Okay. And these were the the turret cameras with 4 different lenses on. They were not the zoom yet. So when I decided one day to doing Simon Says with the kids, which we did every week, and I was getting a little bored by it in the studio every week. So this week, with no idea that I was going to do this, it was totally spontaneous on my part. I said, Simon Says, follow me. I walked out of the studio into the lobby with 60 kids trailing me. I walked out to 67th Street. I walked up 67th Street to the loading dock back in the television studio, got onto the loading dock, into the interior of the building, and back into the studio. Now, that's what I did. What had to be done is Artie had to figure out how to keep me covered, because he didn't know I was going to do this, because I didn't know I was going to do this. And he covered me there, he covered me coming in, down the lobby, and back into the room. Now, how he did that, I have no idea. It was totally unexpected. And remember, the cameras were big things. They weren't portable. They were on wheels, so trundling, as it were. And somehow, Artie Forrest was able to keep up with me the whole way and get him in. So Artie was that kind of a director. And the good thing is, he never said to me later, what are you, crazy? I can't do this. He never, ever confronted me with that. Whatever it was I wanted to do, or however spontaneous I was, somehow Artie was able to keep up with me. And that let me be as spontaneous as I was on the show.
So,
Artie, do you want to deny any of the above?
No, no, what you said was absolutely true. But before we go any further, I've lost all pictures on my screen. All I have is something that says Zoom. Is there something I can do to fix that?
well, we can see you and I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, so I'm not going to see anybody then, right?
I guess. I don't know what's going on your end.
Okay, well,
That's the way you direct it, Artie.
well, as long as Sonny's still there, let me know if he gets up and leaves, all right? But,
Listen, I know you and your cameras. If I got up to leave, somehow you would follow me with the camera.
well, that was quite.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, Artie had to deal with my spontaneity, and he never said to me, "What are you, crazy? I can't do it." He never said that. So yes, he was a part of the success of the show, my partner.
Well, thank you very much. So, if I may, oh, I'm getting a picture back now. So, oh, there I am. Very good. Okay, thank you, people. What Sonny said was right. What he left out was a number of things. One was that I've been chasing him ever since I know him, because when he was like 50, I was 49. And when he was 60, I was 59. And now he's going to be 95. And I'm going to be.
I am, I am today.
Well, then you're ahead of me for one day. But I'm going to be 94 in about 2 or 3 weeks. So I keep chasing him, but I can't catch him. He has me, he keeps eluding me, but what the heck, I can't win that battle. It was a wonderful, yeah.
Go ahead.
It was a wonderful day for me at Channel 5, because I had been I started there as a janitor and worked my way up, because that was early television and you were able to do that. And I ended up finally directing at 1954. So I spent 7 years as a janitor, mic boom operator, cameraman, stage manager, associate director, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was starting to direct the cartoon shows, because that's what Channel 5 was so well known for. And then they came in with this show called Wonderama, and they said, we want you to do it. So I said, fine. And that was when I met Sonny and found out all about what he wants, how he works. And it took a while to find it out, because normally cartoon shows or people talk shows are kind of locked in. He was never locked in. He did what he wanted to do. He went where he wanted to go. He said what he wanted to say. And we were all very happy about that because for once there was some kind of meaning to what we were doing. The children reacted beautifully. The show became so popular that when women became pregnant, they applied for tickets for the show because it took 6 to 7 years for tickets to be sent out. We had about 50 children in the studio audience, and it was people calling in from other states saying, we're coming into town on this and this month, and et cetera, et cetera. So we were doing a very popular show, and it was all because of this gentleman who had a unique way of talking to children. And I won't.
Now, tickets were, you're right, tickets were very hard to come by unless you knew my mother. My mother, who was in the business of theater party brokering and so on, would call me every Monday or send me a note, in green ink every Monday. The following children must get tickets. And I turned to my secretary, I said, okay, these 5 children must get tickets. My mother was using that as a mechanism for improving her business, which she started at 53 as a theater party broker. And so I became an agent for her success. But I need 5 tickets. I would come in almost every Monday. I'd say, okay, fill these seats. So yeah, if you knew my mother, you were in better shape. But anyway, yes, and we didn't stay in the studio, Artie, if you remember. For instance, we went down Panagra. I got Panagra to give me the 2 tickets free. I got FBCCO to give me the cameras free. And Artie and I went down. I had gone to the UN and went to the UN UNICEF Children's Fund. And it was in 1967, and it was 20 years after they started that agency to help children around the world, the UN. And I said to the people at the UN, find me somebody, some child, somewhere in this world that you have actually helped. And I came back to me with yes. And that child was in the Andes, on the shores of, you should pardon the expression, Lake Titicaca in Peru, and then actually in Bolivia. They landed in Peru, and then you had to go off to Bolivia. And that's where they found, that's who I wanted to look in on, a child that was actually helped by the UN Children's Fund. So I promoted Panagra, got the passage down from Panagra. I went to FBCCO and we got the camera works and all that stuff. I didn't have any money for this, any budget at all. And my director and I flew to Peru and then to Bolivia and to the shores of Lake Titicaca. And there we spent time finding the child that had been picked out. And then we photographed him right there in his village. And by the way, in the village, there was the foundation of a building that never had been finished. And I said to them, what is that foundation? Oh, we were going to build a school there, but we ran out of money and, it never got built. And I said at that time, we're going to build it. And that was not an empty promise. Anyway, so then Artie and I did the filming there, and then we flew back, and then we flew the kid we had picked from Peru to come up to America. He spent 3 days with some Peruvians who were higher class, learning how to use toilets and such. And then he flew up to New York, and we met him there. And by the way, when I asked him, what is it in the United States you really want to do? The first thing he said is, I want to visit the grave of John F. Kennedy. Where did that come from? How did he know? Well, he had an earphone radio, and he could listen to what was going on in the world. So this kid on the shores of Lake Titicaca in Peru said to us, the one thing I want to do is visit JFK's grave, site. So yes, we did get him there too. So he came up and we celebrated him, and I had him at the UN, and that was our way of paying tribute to UNICEF. You remember that, Arnie?
Yes, I'd like to add a
All
few
right.
of the things if I may. Sonny, is it okay with you if I talk a bit?
Go.
Yeah, I'm used to this anyway. The few little things that he left out was, yes, when we flew in, we ended up in Bolivia, which was how many? 10,000, 12,000 feet above sea level, which means they open up the door from the plane. You rush down the ladder, you get into a little bus. They immediately drive you to the hotel. You get out of the bus, you just don't even check in. You just go right to your room and faint because there's no oxygen. And people who
Well,
are
there is
there,
oxygen.
who live there.
There is oxygen, but actually
Oh, well,
it's only
everybody, we know.
50%.
That's
When
like
you took in a
nothing.
breath at that altitude, you were only taking in about 50% as much oxygen as you did at sea level. So that was what it was.
Yeah, if I didn't mean to say no oxygen, because if there weren't any, we'd all be dead. However, we lived through that. The next day we started filming. We didn't have much time. You couldn't move fast. If you moved fast, you fell. There's no question about it. You're busy, and that it was a very difficult situation for the first day to get acclimated to it. The boys' room.
And I remember this specifically. I was going along in the morning on location with you, and I thought I was doing okay. You turned to me and said, "Sonny, go back to the car and rest." I said, "I'm fine." You said, "You just tripped on a pebble." Go back to the car.
And that's what happened to us, yes. But I want to describe the boys' room because we went in to see where we were going to film. No floor, it was all dirt, beaten dirt and earth. A single table with a candle on it because they had no electricity. His mother would cook the food outside in a pot on the grass. If they wanted water, they had to go down to a stream where if you had a horse, you would not let him drink from that stream because he would die. So it was very, very primitive, and we kind of learned a lot just by working with him there. The other story, real quick about this, is that we brought him back to the United States. After a day or so of his acclimation, I went up to get him, and I went into his hotel room, and he was just sitting on the edge of the bathtub flushing the toilet. He had never flushed the toilet before. He had no toilets. They don't have them. And he just kept flushing it. It was like a miracle to him that this water would gush out into it. So it was quite something. Then the last story was, I think, the most interesting. Now we get back on the plane, Sonny and I, to fly back to Peru, and then from Peru on to home, to Florida somewhere. So we get on, and the captain gets ready to, everything is going, fell, and all of a sudden we heard a big explosion. And we look out on the side of the plane, and one of the motors is smoking, just terrible. So the pilot said, "Not to worry, we have people here, they'll fix it. It's a very simple thing, this happens all the time." Yeah, sure. So the guys run out, and they sit there, and they got this big book, and they're turning the pages, looking for motor, anyway, they had no idea what to do. So finally, they got to the pilot and said that they were going to have to shut this motor down, and he should sit on the tarmac and burn up fuel to lighten the plane so we could take off to get to Peru on 3 motors, not 4. Which was very encouraging.
No, I'm not sure that was true. I'm not sure we were down an engine. The problem was inherently that at that altitude, the air was 50% less dense than down at sea level, and he had to have a combination of the length of the runway and the weight of the plane. And with all the fuel in it, the plane weighed too much. And now he had to figure out how to solve that. So that's when he took it to the end of the runway, turned the engines on full thrust until he burned enough gas and fuel off that he thought he could take off.
I thought that's what I said, but I guess I didn't sell it that way. But anyway, it happened. We there. But meanwhile, now you got to remember, the plane is the only oxygen on the plane was given to the pilot so that he could stay alive and fly the plane. So the stewardesses were all sitting down in a fainting position. They couldn't move. Some of the passengers who were on the plane, who had been on when they landed, were getting very sick. So the nurses end up to be Sonny and I, because we could breathe that air and we were all right. So we're passing out water and everything else until the pilot said, we're ready to go. So we sat down on our thing and off he took, and every inch of runway this guy took, because he's up on it. They call it alto plano, Sonny, which was meant at the highest point of it. Used that whole runway to go to the very end. We get to the end and the plane starts to go down, and then it catches on and up it goes. So we end up in Peru, and we sit there for a while they fix the motor, change it, and do whatever, and then we fly into Florida, where there's hundreds of people waiting for that plane. But that was a quick story about our expert in terms of that show. But if I want to talk about Wonderama for a moment, do I have the time to do that, Sonny?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one of the most favorite story I have, because if you know Sonny, you know that he kind of destroys things without knowing it. He falls into things, he kicks them, and we were used to this all the time. You know, we'd always be fixing things that he did. Or, I'm sorry, Arthur, and he'd be breaking something like a camera or a lens or something. Anyway, this particular show had the premiere of Russia's, which is Khrushchev, and his son-in-law came on the show. He was touring the United States, showing incredible butterflies that were very, very rare, very rare. And he brought them in, and he said, I'll handle all of this. Nobody touch anything. And okay. So he took them all out.
They were all dead, of course, and they had been carefully mounted by their wings on this display thing.
I was about to get to that, because part of the story was telling him he had to remove the little glass plate on the butterfly so it didn't reflect into the lens. He really didn't want to do it, but I had to tell him, if you don't do it, we won't see them. There'll be just a big glare. So he finally condescended that he would take this glass off each of the butterflies, and he had maybe a dozen of them, and we were all out there, and they were gorgeous. So we start, roll tape, okay, cue Sonny, and Sonny starts the conversation, and he's doing very well. He said, well, let's look at your butterflies. And I go to a shot of the first butterfly, and Sonny's hand comes into the picture with his finger, and he says, tell us about this one. And he happened to touch the butterfly, and the son-in-law says, Mr. Fox, please, don't touch the butterflies. Oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean that. And they talk about the butterfly. Then I go to the second one, and he starts talking about the second one. Sonny's finger comes into the picture, and he says again, Mr. Fox, please don't touch the butterfly. Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't know, whatever it is. We get to the third one, get a close-up of the butterfly. Sonny starts to talk. His finger comes into the picture. He touches the butterfly, and one of the wings fall off. And you heard this gasp of horror. And all of a sudden you hear Sonny, I'm still on the close-up of the butterfly. And you hear Sonny say, you hear the son-in-law say, I told you not to touch the butterfly. This is the ending closing segment of that thing. Never to be forgotten. I told that story every time I could to embarrass him, but for some reason he doesn't get embarrassed. Anyway, that's
Please don't touch the butterfly. I do remember that story very well, and him saying, don't touch the butterfly. Please don't touch the butterfly. Over and over
I saved
again.
the butterfly for
My
you,
finger.
I had a feeling that if his father was closer, he would have declared war at that point. It would have been over. Anyway, that's my favorite story.
Time is running on us. I believe that we want to move on a little bit, maybe change topics a little bit. So first of all, Sonny, how do you feel about sharing some of your early days?
Well, how early do you want to go back? My mother's womb, or you mean professionally?
Well, let's not go that far back. In your television history, talk a little bit about the first show you did on public broadcasting.
Well, it was called, no, it was on CBS. The first television show was on CBS. It was called Let's Take a Trip.
Right.
And then I took two kids, pardon to a different location every week. I think we talked about this, that this was the first remote location show that originated from a different location every week. And then, what did I go on to? I can't remember. And finally, in about 1960, 59, 60, 61 maybe, I came into Channel 5. And what they did is they had this show on Sunday morning that had been done previously by Sandy Becker and previously it's by other people for it was 9 hours, 6 hours, now it was down to 4 hours. And John Kluge, who owned the station, got a hold of me and he said, "We want you to do this show and we want you to make it, class it up. It's so dumb now." So they reached out to me to do that. So I took over this 4-hour conglomeration of jokes, not jokes, but games and costumes and clowns and all that stuff. And over a period of 6 months, it took me to figure out what I really wanted it to be. And I tried different things. I tried an interview with the space authority who was involved in the outer space, which was then just developing the rocket program. And then that became too earnest. That became too educational. And John Kluge, who owned the station, called me and said, "Okay, 3 minutes and then you go to a cartoon. 3 minutes and then you go to a cartoon." So I had to go to that discipline for a little while. And then while that was going on, I started talking with the kids in the studio and chatting with them. And then I may be redundant on the story. I hope I haven't told it before, but the producer of the show heard me chatting with the kids in the studio, and he came over to me and said, "Why don't you try to do that, some of that on camera?" I said, "Yeah?" He said, "Yeah." So that introduced me to the whole idea of interacting with the kids, and then I understood this was not a show to kids. It was not a show aimed at kids. It was really a show with kids. That turned the whole thing around for me.
Sonny, also, we had a question earlier about your brief game show history, $64,000 challenge. If you'd like to talk about that a little bit, and what happened.
No?
No.
Okay, move on.
Thanks.
No, I wouldn't like to, but I will. No, once Wonderama was up and running, I began getting calls about doing game shows as a host of doing game shows. And I did some pilots of game shows that never were but these were prime time shows. And they were competitions. They weren't physical game shows, but they were competition shows like $64,000 challenge, which I ended up doing. And when it went on the air, first, I know what it was. I was called in at one time to audition, audio audition for this new show that we're going to be putting on CBS called $64,000 Question, which is going to go on Sunday nights on TV. And I did an audio run through in a room with the producer. And when it was over, he said, "What do you think?" I said, "I wouldn't hire me." He said, "Yeah, I think you're right. You're not ready for this." And then so fine. I went back to doing my show. 10 months later, I think I'm accurate about this, I get a call saying, "Okay, we're down to 2 people to host the $64,000 challenge, which will be going on the air in 10 days. It's between you and somebody else. Where did that come from? I was out. We all agreed I wasn't ready for it. I still, to this day, do not understand how I ended up being a semi-finalist for the hosting of $64,000 challenge. So as I recall, whoever it was that was doing this, they flew me back to New York. I was in LA at that time. They flew me back to New York. And the other guy did a show on one night, and then I did the show on the next night. And then, I don't know, 10 days before the show was supposed to go on the air live on the network, I was told by my agent, he said, okay, that was on a Monday, I was in LA at the hotel. He said, okay, the show goes on there in 10 days, and you're the host. I thought I had blown it. I thought they wouldn't take me now. So I flew back to New York, I believe on a Wednesday, a week later, only about 5 days before the first show went on the air. And I had to be prepared, and I even had to go out and get new clothes because I was wearing some, suits that wanted me to look a little better than that. So they took me out to an expensive place and bought me clothes. And I just, with very little preparation, went from being out in the sticks doing shows for kids to being the host of the biggest show on CBS on Sunday night at 10 p.m. And that's another whole story, as you know.
But what's interesting to note here is that while you didn't stay with the $64,000 question, fate intervened. You went on to do Wonderama, but $64,000 question had some trouble. The famous game show scandals.
Yeah, well, it was the $64,000 challenge, which is people who had won. There were people who had won the championship on question being challenged. But yes, you're right. And then years after I was gone, of course, they found out that the producers were rigging the show. They were fixing it, who was supposed to win, who was supposed to lose, and they got these contestants involved to following their script. And the whole thing had turned out to be very, very corrupt. That was way after I had left, so I wasn't involved in that. But later, I had a long conversation with them or with the person who was involved, about the whole thing and how it happened. They got very, they got very arrogant about the show, the producers, and they knew it was working. And they figured, well, it's working this way. We'll make sure it keeps working this way. So we're not going to leave it to chance. We're going to get the right person. We're going to tell him when he wins, when he loses. We're going to manage the show. And they got away with it for quite a few years doing that. And I don't know if the people at CBS knew about that or not, but the show was working so well, and on Sunday night was getting such great ratings that even if they knew about it, I suspect they didn't want to know about it. So I was happy not to have been involved for a while when that story broke about the corruption. I know that it wasn't that way when I was there. Now, they may have been helping the people look through certain books to be prepared or something, but I know they weren't being given the answers at that time. I can sense that. But it did get corrupt later when, sometimes people get successful and then they want to make sure they're going to remain successful, and they rig it so they are. And that was one of those times.
Well, we're lucky you wound up on Wonderama and not part of the quiz show scandal. But when you mentioned John F. Kennedy earlier, Sonny, a number of people have asked about your relationship with Bobby Kennedy and how you had him on the show every year. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, that was a wonderful story because I believe it was 1967, Bobby Kennedy had been elected senator, but he wasn't in office. He was now senator-elect in New York. And he was basically out of Washington, had just moved to New York recently. So now he was senator-elect, and he really wanted to get to know New York better. I get a call from his people saying that he wanted to go into some of the more remote parts of New York and get to know those people. Would I accompany him? Yes, So we had a 3-day schedule, and we went to various parts of the city. What?
Camera, look at the camera.
Look at the camera. Here?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. We went to different parts of the city, he and he visited with the people. He didn't make speeches to them. He walked into the slums. He walked into the poorer parts of the city, and he got to know the people and shook their hands and had chats with them. He didn't make speeches to them. He taught with them. And that really gave me a whole insight in Bobby at that time. Now, there were 2 Bobby Kennedys. One was before his brother was assassinated, and one after. The one before was sort of arrogant and and the year between the time his brother was assassinated and the time he reemerged was a time of contemplation and reconsideration, and he was a different Bobby Kennedy later on. And I just loved being with him. And he, at one point, I remember we were going out to the airport. He said, "Well, come by here." I was flying up to Connecticut from Washington. He said, "I'll pass the airport on the way to get him. I'll pick you up or come by and I'll pick you up." And so he was there, and we drove out to the airport. As we're driving out to the airport, he said, "Well, if you want to come out to dinner, we're out there not too far away." But I knew if I went to dinner there, I wouldn't make dinner at home in Connecticut. So I said, "No, I'd rather get to my family." So he said, "Okay," and dropped me off at the airport. But he was warm, he was intelligent, and he would have made a wonderful president. And our life and our country's history changed a lot because of that assassination. And I think I mentioned this. I was at the funeral in St. Patrick's on the train going down with him and all those people to the burial.
Well, most people have questions about Wonderama and your experience, 4 hours of live television. How much of it was planned ahead of time? And were there any particular segments that you really enjoyed or stood out as memories for you?
Well, yeah, there were a lot of those. But the construct of the show was it was at pretty much ad lib all the way. So when I had guests on, like a Bobby Kennedy or somebody like that, then of course that was somewhat planned. I mean, I didn't plan every answer from the interview or all that, but I did plan for what our conversation would be, but always with the idea that these were kids listening. So I was always anxious that the person being interviewed would be relaxed and that we would have a conversation. Not just question and answer, but a conversation. And if the kids get involved in that with their questions, that was great. And I remember on a Sunday, I devoted 1 whole hour to having the mayor of New York be in the studio to answer questions that had been sent in or phoned in. And by the way, we jammed the circuits into the city, not in the city, but in that part of the city, broke down because of the volume of calls that were coming in. So John Lindsay came on Wonderama at that time and answered some of he was all right. It wasn't great. It was okay.
So we're getting lots of comments, memories of the show. Stephanie Siegel did a tongue twister. She makes a proper cup of coffee in a proper coffee pot. They're talking about Just for Fun and the treasure chest keys and how you brought Soupy Sales into the studio one of the first times. Gentlemen's talking. Here's someone talking about how he recorded the show on Thursday and wanted to see Dan Berg, by the way, who brought us the music. Shout out to Dan. He recorded it on Thursday with you, but couldn't see the show because he had to go to Sunday school, and it changed his life. It's traumatic for him, and he's happy to see you now. He's happy he's here now.
I used to get complaints from kids saying who were in Sunday school, that they were missing part of the show, and I'm sure their parents were not happy. They struggled with that one. But yeah, I tried to explain to his parents that there was great spiritual stuff coming out of my show, but I don't think they took that seriously. But what else did we want to talk about? There was other things we wanted to talk about. I loved that we had we ended up being able to do whatever we wanted to do, right, Artie? You know, nobody told us, no, we can't. As long as we provided the resources and didn't ask them for money, we were free to, you know, had arrived at that point in the ratings and in the, you know, having been institutionalized for those 4 hours as a must-see, that we could go anywhere we went. So the challenge to me was, where do I go now? I once remember I walked up the street with a cop just on his beat. And it was across the street from the studio on 67th Street, so we could have a camera follow. And that was interesting. I was trying to find out different ways that I could bring the world into the studio. And so we bring opera stars in, we brought whatever I could think of that would be exciting for the kids and enlarge their lives.
Well, apparently you've also been to Denmark, according to someone here, that you had done a show from a sauna. Does that ring a bell?
No, I never did a show from a sauna.
Okay, well.
But don't forget the most important part of Wonderama. Simon Says.
Oh, yeah. And why did I stop playing? I had to figure out something to do with the kids. And I remember up at Grossinger's in the Catskills, there was a guy who played Simon Says. He was very good. And I was, you know, very interested in how he worked that. And so when I was looking for stuff to fill the 4 hours, I decided I would try that there. And of course, that became an institution then that we always was going to be on Wonderama. And years later, while I was doing this, I got a notice that the guy from Grossinger's was going to sue me for doing one, Simon Says, of course, it was his. And I said, no, it's not his, for Christ's sake. It's all around the world. It's been there forever. No, it's his. He's going to take you to court. And I did get a summons. I know I got some legal action against that. And I went to Channel 5. I said, do you want to help me on this? They said, no. I was on my own. But it finally went away. But isn't that interesting that this guy from the Catskills, I can't remember his name, who did very well and indeed inspired me to do it, wanted to be paid for the fact that I was taking his thing called Simon Says. And so anyway, so that was a little sidebar to what I was doing on the show.
Sonny, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that Frank Santopadre has joined us from Gilbert Gottfried's podcast. And would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I know if you want to talk about it, that's fine.
Thanks for the intro, Randy. I just wanted to stop in and say that Sonny was one of the best guests and the best shows we've done out of 320 shows, and people are still talking about it.
That was how long was that interview?
Oh gosh, I mean, how long ago, or how long did we talk?
No, how long did it last?
Over 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long one.
Yeah, we got the whole Sonny Fox story. And I have to tell you, Sonny, your POW story is one of the great highlights of the show, and Gilbert and I still talk about it, and people still call us and talk about it. It was really very moving.
POW, for those of you who don't know, was prisoner of war, which I was, in Germany. And I wasn't really a prisoner of war. As it turns out, I was in a concentration camp, literally, and I was having the same food as of people in the concentration camps.
The story I remember the two of us tearing up as you told it, and it was beautiful. And I have a special birthday message for you from Whoopi Goldberg, a video that I'm going to send.
Oh, well, if Whoopi is listening, my dear, it's nice of you to be part of this again.
Well,
Whoopi,
I don't think she's here, but she made a video for you, which she sent me, and I'm going to send it on to Randy so you can see it.
Thank you, Frank.
I remember.
My pleasure.
Go ahead. I remember meeting Whoopi. I was at somewhere. She was there. And Dick Starr. I said, "Oh, I'm such a fan of yours. And then I said, my name is Sonny Fox. So, Sonny Fox, you and I have to have lunch. And so eventually we did. And she was a fan of the show, so I didn't know that. And so that's how I met Whoopi.
She also hosted your event at the Paley Center, which was quite nice.
That's right.
Oh, she did. She did. She was kind enough to be there and introduce me. That's right.
Yeah, and you were kind enough to introduce me to her later that night. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah. Yes. What?
So there are more questions than memories here, Sonny. I mean, more memories than questions. I apologize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all these memories down for you and send them to you in a separate email, so all these folks can you can read them later when you have a chance. And it's all warm and fuzzy, and they're just loving you. You know, it's.
Well, I want to thank everybody who has stayed with me on this whole experience of the visit. You know, to have you here wanting to be with me after 70 years or so, or 60 years or so after we were together originally is still, to me, quite incredible and touching. So, and also thank you for setting this thing up and for having been part of my life for so long, Artie Forrest, and so I just I'm so overwhelmed that at the age of 95 to be remembered at all and to be remembered with such vividness. My thanks to all of you who were there then and are still here now.
Oh, thank you.
With that said, how about if everybody will unmute your microphones, we all sing happy birthday to Sonny.
Here we go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday,
dear Sonny. Happy birthday to you. Yes.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. I was saying, I appreciate so much everybody spending the time with me today. And I just thank you, Randy, for setting it up, and Ed for being part of it. And I just am so overwhelmed that all these years later, at my age of 95, that you still have those great memories and I'm still in your minds. So thank you all, one and all. Please be kind to each other and mostly be good to yourselves.
Thank you, Sonny. You enjoy the rest of your day, okay?
Yep. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.